Primus was one of those bands from the 80s that crafted their very own sound. No one sounded entirely like Primus. They were incredibly weird, funky, funny, and heavy. Many critics labeled them funk metal, and there's a good reason why. There's a huge emphasis on vocalist and bassist Les Claypool's bass sound in the band. There's also a lot of comedic and ironic lyricism going on. They've essentially created their very own world from their subject matter, and they keep on reinventing themselves today. In this video, we're going to take a brief look at the discography and their development as a band. Let's take a closer look. Primus was first named Primate and was founded in El Sobrante, California in '84. Singer and bassist Les Claypool and guitarist Todd Huth started playing together as a duo and used a Lindrum machine to begin with since they couldn't find a drummer. Luckily enough, Claypool's friend, Vince Parker, returned from military service around that time, and the duo quickly recruited him as their drummer. In the beginning, they didn't have any money to record anything, so Claypool sold his car and used that money to create their first demo. Primate changed their name after a similarly named band threatened to sue them, and that's when they became Primus. But they didn't just change their name. Over the years, they would continuously switch members, drummers for the most part, while Les Claypool and the ex-Possessed guitarist Larry Lalonde became the longest-lasting members. From the band's start in '84 to their full-length album Frizzle Fry in 1990, the band managed to build a solid fan base in their local music scene. In '87, the band took a break where Claypool joined his former band, Blind Illusion, but Primus got together again shortly after though, and decided to record a live album in '89 called Suck on This, a compilation of 2 live shows that they did at Berkeley Square.
Scratch myself a bit, pull me out of all the corn checks. Closest thing I can.
Shortly after, they released Frizzle Fry. This was a huge record for the band in terms of elevating their reputation. 2 singles were released from the record, the Primus classics, John the Fisherman, and Too Many Puppies. They got the opportunity to tour with Jane's Addiction, and generally it seemed like the early success was a result of their unique sound. They played metal, but with funky rhythm and bass-centered sounds, often simply referred to as funk metal. 1991's Sailing the Seas of Cheese was their first major label release after they signed to Interscope Records. It was another album featuring songs that became synonymous with the band, such as Jerry Was a Race Car Driver and Tommy the Cat. The album went gold and proved that their sound could appeal to a national audience. Now, in '93, they released Pork Soda, an album that debuted at number 7 on Billboard Top 10. Although the album in many cases was darker and heavier than their previous efforts, the lyrics dealt with themes such as murder, suicide, and alienation. And again, the band provided singles that would be regarded as classic Primus songs in years to come, probably the most outstanding one being My Name is Mud. This time around, they made a significant choice in terms of their recording process. Instead of recording at a recording facility provided by the label, the band recorded the album at the rehearsal space. And all the subsequent albums were recorded at Les Claypool's home studio, Rancho Relaxo. In '95, the band released Tales from the Punchbowl. The album features the band's most successful single ever, Wyona's Big Brown Beaver, which was nominated for a Grammy. And the album itself received mostly favorable reviews. During this time, the band got the opportunity to perform the song at late-night TV shows such as David Letterman and Conan O'Brien. Now, in '96, the band was asked to compose a theme song for the animated TV series South Park. And if you've never been aware of Primus or their music before, chances are you've unconsciously heard them every time you've turned on this show. Look, there's even Les Claypool right there. The year after this, they released their 5th full-lengther, Brown album. Shake Hands with Beef and Over the Falls were the 2 only singles from this album. And about the album title, Claypool commented, "This is a milestone record for Primus, so it needed to have a milestone title. The Beatles have their White Album, Metallica have their Black Album, and now Primus have their Brown Album." Although it was seen as a milestone in the band members' eyes, it was met with mixed reviews from reviewers. Some noted that the band had become more refined musicians that explored territories of prog and jazz and praised them for doing this, while others thought the band was declining and that their sound really wasn't that interesting anymore. The band kept at it though and released Antipop in '99. To help them with the creative process, the band invited a series of high-profile rock artists to work with them in the studio. James Hetfield from Metallica, Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, Stuart Copeland from The Police, Jim Martin from Faith No More, and Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit were all involved in creating the record one way or another. The album's only single and music video, Lacquerhead, was banned from MTV for depictions of drug use, although the lyrics contained an anti-drug message.
Lacquerhead knows but one desire. Lacquerhead sets his skull on fire.
Following this release, the band went on hiatus from 2000 to 2003, with Claypool later stating, "The end of the 90s was an unhappy Primus camp. I hit a creative stagnation that wasn't helping us forward. It was just time to stop. And I had been asked for many years, how long can Primus go on? And I always said, I'll do it until it's not fun anymore. And it just wasn't fun anymore on many different levels."
Sometimes bored, sometimes lonely.
For a long time, the band stayed inactive creatively. They did take on occasional gigs, tours, or even released additional material from previous years, but it would be many years until they would release another full-length album. But after 12 years of creative hibernation, they got back together again. The band's 7th studio album, Green Naugahyde, wasn't released until 2011. Most fans found the sound on this album to be quite nostalgic, somewhat familiar to the band's earlier albums. Overall, it mostly gained favorable reviews. And when talking to Claypool about the band's creative comeback, he mentioned how drummer Jay Lane played a huge part in creating a positive moral for the band during this time. So we talked to Jay Lane, and we actually had a jam with Jay Lane. And he brought this huge ball of energy back into the room from the very second he started playing. And that's the main reason we're doing it again. There's this creative flow again that hasn't been there in a long time. At this point, the band had almost existed for 3 decades. And so, in 2014, a biography book about the band was released via Akashic Books. The book explores the band's history as well as Les Claypool's side projects and collaborations. It's probably one of the best sources out there if you want a more well-documented piece of their story. I just want to mention that in this video, we're barely scratching the surface, so make sure you check that out. The band also released their 8th album around this time, and this seemed to be a conceptual left-field move for the band. Titled Primus and the Chocolate Factory with a Fungi Ensemble, the album tried to reimagine the soundtrack from the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Claypool stated in an interview that he was obsessed with 2 films in particular during his school years. First, it was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and then Jaws. So maybe we can expect an interpretation of the Jaws soundtrack in the future. Who knows? Now, Primus' final and latest album, The Desaturating 7, came out in 2017. Just like their previous album, there was an overarching concept told in the lyrics. Not inspired by a movie though, but by a book. Les Claypool had this book that he used to read for his children called The Rainbow Goblins. Claypool was so captivated by the characters, the story, and the artwork of the book that he pitched the idea to the other band members about retelling the story through his own musical efforts. It almost comes off as a progressive concept album. I want to mention at the end of this video that there's just so much more that we can talk about related to Primus. Their different band members have all been a part of other bands that are also super interesting. The way Claypool continuously go back to the theme of ocean life and sea workers is quite interesting. And their way of merging silly, heavy, and unconventional sounds with comedic lyrics also deserve a discussion of its own. I'll make another Primus video in the future for sure, but I can't promise that it will come out soon. But let me know in the comments below what you think I should focus on once I start making it, okay? That would help out a lot. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to learn how I make videos like these, then make sure you click the link below or the video card on the screen right here. That will bring you over to Video Essay Warriors, my second channel where I teach you the ins and outs of creating video essays without having to worry that much about learning everything on your own. Thank you so much. Cheers.